Rick,
Oh, okay. Gonna wait a minute till a couple more people show up. Mhm. And you're going to be off camera. Mhm. Mm.
Good morning, everyone.
Welcome to our Sunday program. Nick and Charles, Sherry, Keith, Angio, John, Chris, Benny, Rachel, Frank, and Ilana. Glad to have you all here on this before Thanksgiving Sunday. Thanksgiving is a rather amazing time in a lot of ways because all sorts of feelings arise, all sorts of sensory aspects are available to us. And it's a very intimate time, both with the season and family, with our friends that join us, with the food that's offered. And we want to speak today in the context of what we've brought up in the previous talks of belonging, of the sensory realm that's involved in belonging, that's also makes us more deeply connected and intimate with ourselves, with others, with the world. The Buddha began one of his teachings by holding up a flower. And one in his audience smiled, and that was his chief disciple, Mahas Kasyapa. In holding up the flower, a flower can represent a lot of things, but a flower is a sensory object. It can have wondrous smell and sight. It's also like the unfolding, the ultimate unfolding in a moment. A flower can represent that. And in a way, I'm looking at 12 flowers right here because each of us is at the maximum unfolding of our life at this moment. So we bring the totality of our body, mind, our emotions, our senses to our life. And this practice we do of meditating, of exploring our existence is one way of heightening our sensory experience. And what's coming up for that, a couple people here might be joining in Rohatsu Sesshin, a sesshin of many days. There's a lot of silence, but in meditating and keeping silence day after day, moment after moment, there's a heightened sense of refined experience, and our senses are even heightened to the point where during a meal, a simple breakfast where you're served oats and yogurt and fruit, that the slight seasoning of salty gamascio, which has salted sesame seeds, roasted sesame seeds that are partially ground up, and the aroma and the taste of that simple, normally considered bland oatmeal is just like the sweetest experience of the moment. And many of us who have sat sesshin have experienced that. And many of you who have had been deprived of food for on a long hike, and then finally you sit down and taste what's in your backpack to give nutrition. Suddenly it's like the unfolding of sensory experience is just huge. So I'm going to stop there. What would you like to say? You're joining me in this conversation.
Okay. So I wondered about the flower. And after all, when we stop and think about belonging and deepening of belonging through understanding that we are connecting and deepening connection through intimacy, I start to wonder about the Buddhist practices. And I look at all the Buddhist practices and I see that really, if I look at all of them, like sitting zazen or mindfulness meditation or Tibetan Buddhism in its various aspects, it's really all about heightening our senses. So the path, even though we so much talk about the Dharma mentally, when we take a deeper look into the Dharma and we say, okay, but I read that chapter, but like, did I really understand it? And if I thought I understood it, but why did I forget it? Like in 2.5 minutes, I forgot what I just read. However, I will never forget the gesture of the Buddha holding the flower. Or maybe when I was sitting in meditation, I will never forget the mosquito that was going around my head. I will never forget that. So why is that? And what was the Buddha teaching by holding that flower? And to me, what the Buddha was teaching is the exact same thing that we see in that moment of Thanksgiving, just before we start the meal. Our senses are wide open. And so our senses, our body, is what happens in our practices. So we all know that the Tibetan practice is very colorful and noisy and full. But why, you ask yourself? Is it just ritual? And I found through my own practice that it's exactly the same as Zazen, which is very austere. How can that be? The common denominator is my body. And my awareness. So when the Buddha holds the flower, I believe, to me, he's showing me. He's showing me, this is who you really are. This beautiful, delicate perfection that is just there sensually, in the most sensual ways. This is really you. And the awakening to that is what to me, is what the real enlightenment is, or the real awakeness, or whatever we want to call it. It's like when we are, as a flower is profoundly connected, intimately part of, through our senses and our whole awareness, then we become alive. And then we recognize who we are, who each one of us is. And from that comes compassion.
So the flower also represents impermanence and a change, and it represents interdependence and birth and death, and you bring up these practices of in Zen, in mindfulness, in Theravadan, in Tibetan Buddhism, and in other religious traditions. There are all these traditions that there's a real effort to maintain the traditions. So there's a help along the way in maintaining the traditions, and selecting one over another, it doesn't really matter. You have to choose one. You need a tradition. You need, much as a mother engages in the tradition of motherhood, not by thinking about it, but by practicing it and doing it, of providing nutrition, providing safety, providing cleanliness, providing opportunity of what the kid's going to do next, of providing love and nutrition, and this, by that connection, by looking in the eyes, by holding, by nurturing, there's that deep connection. And compassion is realized because it's manifest. It's not something that is tried for, or it's like, oh, I need to be compassionate to my kid. It's like, that's just what flows out of it. So by maintaining that tradition of what mothering is, it manifests in its realized state in the one body, which is also talked about as like the three jewels of the Buddha Dharma Sangha. It is basically this enriched unfolding that we each get to experience and will experience in a bountiful way on Thanksgiving. So also what comes up in this is in making that connection, like a mother has to deal with poopy diapers, there's difficulty, has to deal with crying, has to deal with discomfort of herself and another. And so there's always trying to find ways of meeting the difficulty. And it can't be met with bypassing it, because it has to be, how do you bypass a poopy diaper? You have to take care of it. You have to meet it directly. And so how do we encounter that in other ways in our lives? And so I want to bring up another example of, like, for me, decades ago, I was driving up and down California, and I'd come up from San Diego area to the Bay Area. And one of the roads I love to travel on is Highway 198, which is coming up the 5. It would connect through Coalinga over towards San Lucas and King City, and go through this wonderful terrain. The Coast Range, the Diablo, well, not the Coast Range, but the Diablo Range, and crossing the San Andreas Fault, and it's mountainous and curvy, and there were landslides, and with my geology background, it was just delicious. But every time I went on that road, I drove by this institution called Pleasant Valley State Prison. And I'd look to the side, and here were these rectangular buildings, these guard towers, these chain link fences, the circular wire to prevent whoever was inside there, they couldn't get out. And so time after time I'd go by and I'd look there, and it's like, who's in there? You know, who are they? They're protecting us from what's in there. What kind of beings are in there? Are they animals? Are they sick people? Who's in there? And it's like, I want to go in there sometime and see what's inside. And so years and years went by, and finally I had the opportunity, I encountered another priest who was actually going to that prison. And ended up saying, hey, I'd like to do some prison work. And he said, well, go with me. So I went with him a couple of times and went inside. And when you finally go inside and you're there, and it's like, okay, I'm going inside this prison, and these doors open, these metal doors open, and you go through and you show your ID, and a guard looks you in the eye, who are you and what's in your bag, and they let you go through, you show your ID, the door shuts, you're inside now. One of the gates, but there are like at least 4 gates you go through before you're finally inside. And who's inside? And you see people, you see guards with weapons and keys and other things to protect them. Their vests, and they're protected. And then you see guys in blue who are the inmates, and they're of all different ethnicities in there, but they're all wearing blue. And it's like, who are these people? Who are these people? And go inside into a chapel where you have to go through another locked door into the chapel itself. So already, you've penetrated 6 locked doors. And you carry an alarm in case somebody attacks you, and you go horizontal, the alarm will go off, and all these security guards will come and rescue you. And so it's like, what's the element of why do I have to have all this protection? Who are these dangerous people? And go and sit in there, and these men start coming in, and you start meeting their gaze. And you start connecting with them, looking them in the eye, they look you in the eye, and shaking their hand or bowing to them. And we gather in a circle and begin our practice, a little meditation, a little bit of a talk, and then get to hear the men actually talk to me, and make contact, and finally see their humanity. Feel their heart, feel their curiosity, feel their normalness of humanity. And it's like, wow, inside all these different gates, I come into this space, and here is a human being. These are human beings in here, and I'm a human being, and these are human beings. I'm not different than these people in here. And it's like, wow, what the power of that connection transformed me in a way, in a deep way, because it's like, wow, there are people in here, human beings in here, and and they each have a story. They each have their cares and concerns, and how can I connect with that? What is that? To make a connection there.
So to make a connection, you have to become human yourself. To see their humanity, you have to become human yourself, first of all. Because otherwise you will see them as labels. You won't see the flowers.
So I have to see myself as a flower, as an unfolding, as that I'm in a way perishable.
Yes.
Vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
To meet the vulnerability in others.
Yes.
And
past the guards, past the protectors, past the defenses.
Past all the difficulties.
Past all the difficulties.
So that's one example.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other kinds of difficulties that we encounter on a daily basis. And so maybe it's meeting these difficulties, which is where really the unfolding happens.
But meeting them, not going around them.
Mm-hmm.
But to meet them, you have to be a flower. You have to be vulnerable and recognizing of your own vulnerability, because otherwise you'll be just another wall, another barbed wire.
So tying it into like our practice, we get connected to our maintaining the traditions of our practice. Maybe in a way, the strict maintenance of those traditions is also the barbed wire and the walls.
I also think it's how we meet ourselves because it contains us. So it's only by sitting zazen that we get to really get to encounter our true self. Most of the time, or any other one, most of the time, our mind is engaged with everything else, right? So I think it's this practice, it's kind of a prism. Our practice is a prism that rarefies us into seeing the flower.
So a prism, what it does is it takes like white light, regular sunlight, and it breaks it up into a rainbow, an
Yes.
array.
Yes.
And so you're saying that this practice we do, whatever practice we do, the meditation practice we do is like a prism that kind of opens up the array of more possibilities of the sensitivities and sensuousness of our existence.
Yes.
And that we need to embrace it, not embrace it. Can we stop here?
Yes.
So we're going to stop here with our dialogue and open it up to see what we've touched in you. Yes, Benny. Good morning.
Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah. So good morning, everybody. I would like to share with you this morning my enlightenment from this morning of just stepping into this room with all of you and feeling this enormous smile, enormous smile all over me towards people who I guess mostly I haven't yet met, physically, that is. And I said to myself, this is very unusual. My ability to share this, my ability to experience this, and the smile is like the flower. When I hear the very sweet teachings about passing the Dharma with the flower and the smile, there's no difference between the smile and the flower. They are both so precious and delicate, and they both convey very deep wisdom for me. So I want to thank you all for making it happen for me this morning.
Thank you, Benny, for sharing about the smile and the flower are kind of meeting each other. That's beautiful. Yes, Chris.
Good morning. Because I'm not on mute. Yeah, I appreciated what you said. I had to say, Doug. I think one of the big barriers for most of us is just letting go of our preconceptions about what something is like, because we get all these messages from other sources other than a direct source or a direct exposure to the person or the situation. certainly that applies to prison. I'd never been in a prison before going with you, and I guess I had a lot of preconceptions. Well, it's not just letting go; it's being willing to let them go. Just it's like, well, this is probably not very accurate. I'm just going to try to see what it really is like, and who these people really are, and just let go of all that stuff. And I think that's a really important approach. And yeah, there's a lot of security, and you don't know what's going on here, and it seems kind of risky. But once you're there and you're dealing with people, you realize that these are just people, and they just want to. They're just trying to live their lives to the best of their ability and to hopefully make a contribution and have some quality in their lives, just like all of us. And we have a common ground there. We can meet them on that very equal level. And I think it just applies to all kinds of situations. Letting go of our preconceptions about what it's like to live in a flyover state, or the south side of Chicago, or in the Middle East, or to be a small child and watch your parents being killed in front of you, or I think it's just so important that we kind of just let go of everything that we've been told. We've been given all these messages constantly, and we're just inundated with it. And so we feel so separate from one another because we're not experiencing one another at a heart level, a direct level. And we just have to say no to that and just, I will figure this out for myself. I'm going to experience this situation or this person for myself. I'm not going to allow somebody else's opinion or worldview taint my or invade my personal experience. To me, I think that's crucially important.
Yes.
Especially in today's world.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
And this is what I personally call intimacy. I'm working with a couple right now who's been married for a long time, 30 some years. They're extremely successful in everything they've done, except in the relationship with each other. And the work has been going on, and it's really tough. But really, all I've had to do is allow them to shed the messages they've accumulated over the years. And the way to do that is just holding the flower as they struggle and struggle, and just keep holding that flower. That's all I have to do until they see it with their own eyes, not the narrative.
A situation arises for me where, like on the streets of Telegraph Avenue, North Oakland, where a lot of young people are out and about going to the different restaurants, and there are some others walking the street who are definitely with difficulties of one kind or another, being homeless, being mentally ill. And I remember encountering one man who talks to himself
Mhm.
He has a gravelly voice, and he walks up and down the street and talks to himself, and people probably look at him, and because he's a bit disheveled and talking to himself, this guy's crazy, and they kind of pull away. And as I was walking by, I pulled out a flower out of my pocket. I'll call it a flower, and I presented it to him. Met his eye, met his gaze, and he received it, and he liked it, and it was like, oh, his whole demeanor was just like erupted in joy and kindness and delight and a dance and it was just to have that kind of meeting and exchange, to see delight in another was, I don't know, it just felt, I felt we connected in some way, and I danced off and he danced off, and so it's how do we dance with other? How can we meet other and drop, like Chris was saying, the preconceptions? Just to meet the experience, be in a way unafraid. Maybe inside ourselves we are unafraid, so we can meet what's directly there and just, well, what's going to happen here? I'd like to hear some more. Yes, Angel.
So it occurred to me as you were speaking back in reference to Chris that besides the preconceptions, we have a lot of expectations too. And so you expect the man talking to himself to behave crazily. Well, prisoners, because they've done something, they might do it again. So I think the antidote to that is to actually just be in the now, what's in front of you. So, and you had a really nice experience with the gentleman. So it worked out well, regardless of whatever expectations you had. You just in the present. And I think we can return to that present, that we don't have so much of our past preconditions or future expectations for now. Thank you.
So is it through our practice, then we meet the direct experience in the now? It seems like we drop everything. We drop not only our expectations, but maybe our knowledge, our teachings, our virtues, we're just present. And so in that nakedness, that precious nakedness, we can meet what arises in a very, without having to even evaluate anything. It's like we meet it as a direct experience, and then it's just fresh. What arises, and then maybe afterwards we think about it as like, oh wow, I was really virtuous in that moment, or wow, somehow kindness came out of me, or wow, I was surprised in my reaction. I didn't have a reaction I thought I would have. Anyway, thank you, Angel. Rachel, did you want to? No?
No, I don't actually have a, sorry, I don't.
Oh, okay. Frank?
Is it his mic on?
No, it should
Okay.
pick it up here.
The understanding of the flower as vulnerable, representing change, representing the cycle of birth and death, representing beauty and truth, was added to my experience yesterday on a walk with Benny, when he said, "Have you ever eaten a nasturtium flower?" I said no. We plucked one from the low vines along the roadside, beautiful orange petals. And I ate the petals, which were beauty and delicacy and tenderness and quiet sensually experienced. And I put the root down in the calyx that holds the flower petals. And then he said, no, no, it's the other end to start with. So he plucked another one. And it comes out to a little fine point. And just chewing that was again a different sensation, also sensual, but bringing me into the presence of my expectations about it. It had a sweetness and a cucumberiness to it, and I ate it up, and then I ate the flowers behind it. It was truly a marvelous experience. And then the back of my throat began to add new experience. And as I began to say something about that, my tongue and my lips and my cheeks and the inside of my mouth began to become activated as there was a sensory heat, a spiciness, as if one had eaten some kind of something from the pepper family. And I realized that my expectations had been very quiet. And so there was a receptivity to the experience and not a reactivity. And the sensation of hot and spicy was about 30 seconds long. And it passed away with no residue. So my whole experience of the talk this morning on the Buddha, his chief disciple, and the flower has a great deal more fullness for me. Thank you for letting me share.
Yes, John. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. This is so beautiful. And appreciate everyone's words. I have a few science facts to share. I want to say that we are all deeply connected to the universe in many, many ways. And I think we are all, with meditation and other things, realizing that more and more. And we intake scent molecules and beauty from flowers in nature, hopefully every day. We inhale 25 septillion molecules of air every day. And we are all about 70% water in our bodies. And thus we are 70% identical to everybody else. Our makeup. And we can tune into these aspects and realize a commonality and connect with each person. I just want to share that. Thank you all. I sadly, I have to slip away pretty soon to go to an appointment.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You in our culture, we are not very tuned into our senses very much. Don't have a language that's well developed, I feel, about our senses. And when I Google sensuality, most of what comes up is related to sexuality. But in reality, we are sensual beings. And we have, I find, and so being present, as you mentioned earlier, George, really being present is being tuned in to our awareness of our being, right? Which is to all the sensors, even to light, being tuned into light. That right now we can tune into the light that we're in, and we feel I feel my body tingling and waking up when I tune into the light. And my senses are coming online, whereas if I'm in my mind, everything kind of shuts down.
Hey, Nick. Yes. Morning.
Good morning. I don't know if you guys can hear me okay, but I'm really looking forward to Thanksgiving. And when you guys were talking, I was thinking like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely going to Thanksgiving. You know, I have all these expectations. It's going to be great. It's going to be like this. But I thought like, actually, I'm not sure if I'll make it, you know, like it's still a week away or so. Anything can happen. And for me, like if a lot of times with family holidays, I'm like rushing to prepare. I'm rushing to drive somewhere, and if I'm not careful, you know, something could happen. I could, you know, get distracted, crash my car or something like that. So I thought like, well, like Thanksgiving is this like really great expectation, this big sensory overload experience, this kind of like you know, mountain peak experience. The main event is Thanksgiving. But if I don't take care of myself now and before I get there, I could run into trouble. Like, you know, it hasn't happened yet. So I was thinking like, well, I guess maybe in some sense what we're talking about is like, you know, like we're being present, almost like every moment is Thanksgiving. That's kind of, maybe that's sort of like the story Doug was telling about eating oatmeal in Sesshin, where it's this like experience of just pure oatmealness, and you're not comparing it with anything. You're not saying, oh, I wish it was turkey or whatever. You know, it's just oatmeal, and it's just this like overload, incredible overload of flavor, and it's like you're just there with the oatmeal. So this, I guess I'm just sort of reflecting on this, like maybe kind of what Ilana was saying about sensuality is sort of like Thanksgiving is in my family, it's a very sensual experience of turkey and stuffing and, you know, food and drink and all this. But it's like, you know, maybe my practice is making every moment Thanksgiving, so that I'm sort of like present and here and sort of celebrating each moment, and sort of, you know, like each moment is the moment rather than like waiting for or preparing for some moment in the future. Although I guess I'm still trying to figure out how we balance the two, you know, like being present in the moment, but also having plans and planning for things. But yeah, I guess just that thought of like, how do I treat every moment like Thanksgiving? Maybe somehow is kind of part of Zen practice. Thank you.
Well, what sometimes preparing is just delicious too. A lot of times, you know, when I was a contractor and had jobs to do, I had to make equipment that would fit the particular job, because it was a unique job and you could not buy the equipment off the shelf. So it was like, I got to make it, I got to figure it out. And there was just delight in figuring it out and putting it together and getting the material together and drilling the holes, welding it together, painting the thing so it looked ready for bringing to a job site. And just that whole production part to me was there was a lot of kinetic aspects. There's dealing with mass, with odd temperatures, high temperatures, low temperatures, the smells what you have with, you know, it was really a sensory experience that sometimes I get dinged up because I'd grab something that was just freshly cut on a chop saw and it was knife sharp, and so I'd start to bleed. And it's like, yeah, there's you know, the sensory aspects of all of that, even the production. Of course, you got to be careful when you're in the kitchen with a knife. You know, you might add some thumb to the salad, and so I think bringing all of the Thanksgiving joy to even the preparation of it is a good idea. Like you're talking about, even probably driving there and enjoying the whole thing. Thank you, Sherry, for being with us. Happy Thanksgiving. Yes, Rachel.
So, riding a little bit on what Nick was sharing earlier and what you're just saying, Doug, you know, Thanksgiving is it is my most favorite celebration in the year. And I've adopted it wholeheartedly from a tradition that didn't really have a Thanksgiving tradition. But, you know, how do we just, you know, so what's the point? What's the point of having a Thanksgiving day when every day, every moment of every day is an opportunity to recognize my gratitude? Every morsel that I eat, every molecule that I inhale, it's an opportunity to be present to my gratitude for everything, for my life, for everything. So what's the point of Thanksgiving, of a Thanksgiving day? And you know, yes, there's the preparation around it, and yes, there's the anticipation of gathering with loved ones or strangers. You know, it's like, but it's like a prism. It kind of hones in it. Not a prism, but a magnifying glass, or a collective coming together to recognize one's gratitude for whatever it is, and also a collective gratitude for our collection. And we, you know, and so to sort of discern it from the ordinary, you know, it's even like coming together for a Sunday morning. It creates a ritual around it, and I think that these things are really important to help us remember, to then take it into the rest of the 364 days or 3 days of the year, to keep remembering. And that it reminds me also of something that Frank often has said to me: you just have to remember to remember. So for me, you know, I cherish Thanksgiving Day, even though I'm grateful all of the time. But I'm grateful for the opportunity for us all to just kind of stop and recognize and listen to each other and tune into what another person speaks their gratitude to. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Charles, good morning.
A flower.
What is it?
It's a flower.
Oh,
It's a beautiful flower.
Would you unmute? Do you want to unmute? Unmute?
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, one more time. I'll try this again. This particular flower is on my, or was on my balcony. And I don't know if anybody knows what that is particularly. It is a flower from a paddle cactus. And I'd never seen this particular cactus flower before. And this particular year, it shot out all these pods. And I have pictures of the pods, which were also beautiful. And then these amazing flowers appeared out of this cactus. And every morning, they didn't last that long, just several days, but I'd get up in the morning and I just went out to see the flowers. They were so beautiful, especially coming out of this plant whose thorns have embedded my skin numerous times, and they're really hard to get out. You got to use a magnifying glass and they get in there. But anyway, something so beautiful can come out of something anyway, that was one item. It's just when I thought of flowers, that's the first thing that came to my mind. And another was, we were talking about our practice and presence, and these particular sessions, the value for me is enabling me, at least for a period of time, to become aware. I have a practice that I do every day that extends a couple of hours, and it's connected with physical exercises and meditation, and I even do some push-ups and pull-ups. It's just sort of a thing that I've developed after studying with many, many teachers over the years. And that's good. But this is a little different. It's a different flavor, and it's an experience where I'm able to go through my own practice and simultaneously connect with other people. So it's a certain type of flowering. Another thought that I had was about the concept of consciousness or awareness or whatever, and came up from a number of you. And to be honest, I'm not sure actually what brings me back to presence during the day. In all honesty, it's somewhat random, because I can go for seemingly, not that I'm not paying attention to things, but I'm not aware that I'm paying attention to things. And then I'm not sure exactly what brings a different flavor of presence where I am aware that I'm experiencing. And it lasts for a period of time until I'm sort of moved by something else. But this is a particular experience where I seem to be more aware of not only that I'm here, but I'm here with all of you. And I value that. That's all I have to say.
Yes, Chris, again?
I just wanted to say quickly that talking about the nasturtiums really brought back a memory very vividly. When I was a very young child, we had nasturtiums growing all over our backyard in the spring. They only bloom basically in the spring in that area I grew up. And I remember just getting so excited because, yeah, you could actually, these little flowers had these long, the underside of them had this long projection, which was, I didn't know it at the time, but it has a little bit of nectar in it right at the tip of it, at the bottom. So like a hummingbird, it's exactly the shape of a hummingbird's beak, and the hummingbird can go in there, and then while he's trying to get that nectar, he's gathering, I'm sure, pollen to pollinate. Yeah, so I used to take them and bite off just that very tip part and taste that nectar, and it would be so incredibly wonderful. It was just such a pure, sweet taste. So thanks for bringing that up, because it really brought that back to me. I haven't thought about that in years.
I want to talk a little bit about what Nick was saying about the tension of not knowing and anticipation. And again, when I notice it's kind of like a guru, that tension, because I can sense it in my body, and my body does certain things when I'm tense that it doesn't do at other times. And so it calls my attention to the present moment. And because so much energy is generated, and I have energy to truly take it in when I remember.
Coming back to difficulty, and Charles brought up about these beautiful flowers on this cactus, but with these really tiny needles that takes a magnifying glass to pull them out if you bump them in the wrong way. If you're without a shirt, or even if you have a shirt and you bump into it, you probably get a whole array, a community of these things on you that creates difficulty in a lot of ways, especially if you're in a hurry. It's like, how do I get these off? I got places to go and people to see. And but also you brought up about how there was a sense of I don't know, peace, of satisfaction of being in community, of being connected, and how community is really an important place to bump into each other, to connect in wonderful ways, and maybe even in difficult ways. And hopefully in community as possible to also not run away or step away, and instead meet the difficulty that's present. And it really takes community to sometimes see these qualities that we have that especially when maybe it's more helpful when we don't know people so well, because yet we can trust them. When we trust ourselves, we trust other people more, that we get shown aspects of ourselves that maybe we didn't know before. And for example, one of my tendencies has always been, I'm an active person. I got to go. I got to take off. I got deadlines. I got people to see. And so there might be a gathering, and it's like, instead of, making contact with each person, say, hey, bye, it's been good being with you, I just say, oh, it's time for me to go. Well, they're all busy. I'm out of here. And I disappear. And yet that creates difficulty because it's like people might have, I didn't finish the connection. And so it's helpful when I find out that that isn't helpful. And so other people help us see ourselves or aspects of ourselves that maybe we're not aware of or pay attention to, or anyway, it's rubbing up against each other is important, and it's important to also then have other people in the community that show these aspects to ourselves that we can maybe more tenderly experience, so that we're not defensive or guarded or fearful, or that we actually can meet the difficulty inside ourselves of the discomfort. So community is really wonderful in that way, for that opportunity, and it's not always easy. Like the spines on a cactus. Yes. Good afternoon, Keith.
I'll just say real briefly, since I haven't shared, but when Benny was talking, I definitely, I was on an airplane every day this past week at 10 a.m. So I was unable to join you guys until Friday, and I missed the Sangha and the community greatly during my whole week of not having that interaction. So even in the short time that I've been a part of this group, I've come to value it and feel a void when I don't have an opportunity to join on Zoom. The other thing that came up when Chris was talking was about how we have preconceived notions about people and thoughts about people, or how we think people might be, and I think back to in my youth when I studied Tibetan, and there was a philosophy or a theory that they had that was everything dies, completely dissolves and disintegrates into nothing 7 times in every second. So how can you hang on to what you have at any given moment? And I thought about people that probably committed crimes and the environment that they were in, and the bad karma of all the people around them, and they're kind of a product of their environment. And how long after they've committed that deed they've now been incarcerated for, should they keep being punished? And how long are they that same person that committed that crime, now that crime, now that they've been removed from those circumstances in that environment? And I think it's just, it's not a good thing that in this country there's more people in prison than any other country in the world. And you wonder how much reform is actually going on. I'm looking forward to going to the banquet with you when I'll be in California next month. Thanks.
I heard it's a little connected to what you just saying, Keith, but I heard Ram Dass talk about how we keep othering other people. And he talked about a homeless person and a lady that decided to give that homeless person $250 a month. But she didn't want to give it to him in set sums, so she figured out that she's going to do it randomly. And Ram Dass says that he kind of took that story in and processed it and thought to himself, why would this very act of generosity, why is it so set? And he kind of delved deep within as he does. And he recognized that actually there's a process that he does himself, which looks to him like he's caring, and he feels good about himself. But really, when he looks at his experience, he's actually closed. And he asked himself, why is my body feeling so tense around it? Why am I sensing such a closeness? And he realized, oh, when I see somebody like that homeless person, and I allow myself to really open to that person and see their preciousness and their humanity, which is precisely like my own, how could I let them be in the street? I can't. I have to bring them into my living room. I have to feed them. I have to take care of them. And then he realizes how overwhelming that is. And he's beginning to work with, okay, then how do I manage to this high degree of central openness and intimacy? How do I manage to live through that in this? And so I just want to say that there is in that being open to each other, there is a high degree of sensitivity that we come to acknowledge, and that there is some sort of a self-awareness that informs where our boundary is, where we feel okay saying no. And that's a part I would like to explore with this group further as we go on, is like, how do we negotiate that very sensitive space of being present and yet maintaining a sense of our own separateness, I suppose. Is it separateness? So that's an inquiry I haven't delved all the way to, but I'd like to do it in the future here.
So in delving into this topic, then you're maybe in a more rude or rudimentary way of does that deal with the topic of othering?
Exactly. Yes.
Where we more conveniently categorize and stay separate. And so how to more tenderly approach that?
Yes.
Because that's a dominant condition in the world, where strife is happening all over the place. So okay, so we're going, will be a place of inquiry. We'll be exploring some more.
And again, we want to invite everybody to please consider giving a Dharma talk one of these Sundays.
Yes.
I know that this is not just, I'm compelled to say along those lines of othering, and maybe this is fodder for a future time, but it's like the notion of away, there really isn't any away.
Way or
A way, like there's no throw it away.
throw it away. Okay.
They're away. It's like not here. It's away. I want to put it away. There really isn't a place. There's not a, there isn't a, you know, there's no away. Certainly when we think about throwing things away, it's all still here.
Mhm.
It's some part of our planet, our collective beingness. So in the same sense that, you know, those people are other people, you know, it's in it for me, it's the same kind of notion of like we are discrete things, beings, and yet we're all a collection. You know, I have my belongings and I don't want that one anymore, so I'm going to throw it away. But really, it's still, so we're all part of each other. There is no other, right? And yet there is. And so it's this, you know, dance or this struggle or this relationship that, you know, you know, yeah, I don't have an answer, but I often think about, you know, how you can't just throw it away. It's not, there's no way. It's still there somewhere. So, you know, those are other people, but you know, even the gesture of other, it's like, no, they're not other, they're people like me. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And two of you in a far distant time zone. Well, maybe not that far, but more distant. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to everybody else. It's just turning noon. Have a great Thanksgiving. And next Sunday, Maya Road is going to give the talk. And from here in Los Altos. And join us if you can on the 26th. Okay. Okay.
Bye.
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 Hi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.